We had them smoked for us. They're our oysters.
That's St. Jean's, right?
That's right, yeah.
Delicious.
They're good.
This is sort of where it all begins. After you've already done some harvesting, you've got shells left over. They go to the shell pile, and there they're left to be cooked over meats and particles off the shells. The sun bleaches them and cleans them, and then they get bagged and put into these Vexar bags. We take them from there and put them out on racks in the water in the tidal area. The tide will come in and out and wash them and clean them a little bit. And then we have high pressure washers with seawater that spray all the sand and everything off that the tides have left so that we get nice clean shell. Then we bring the shells up, stack them and put them in here. This is all filtered seawater. It's brought up to temperature with heaters and prepared for the larvae. The larvae come in from a hatchery in Washington State. We put 4 million larvae into a tank. We have 160 what we call Vexar bags. I don't know how many shells that is. They're lost. And we set them out with a watering can. We literally seed them like a garden. They'll stay in this tank for 6 days. Little larvae swim around. They'll go through all the shells. They'll find a place they like. And then when they get to a spot they like with their little foot, they'll stop. They'll put some glue down and they always set on their left shell. Don't know why. They just do. And then they'll grow. And they'll turn into clusters and big oysters. And I'll show you some set oysters on shells. We'll move into the setting shed. I've got the microscope set up so you can see them once they've set on the shell. And these ones, after they've been set, they go to a beach and they're looked after and covered up with burlap and looked after and cared for. Beach crews monitor how they're doing. Then these shells get opened up and spread out across the beaches and they're allowed to grow, and we harvest them in 3 to 4 years. But they get moved around and they're like livestock. How are you doing, Anita?
And here we have one of the oyster carnivores. He eats most of the oysters in the ocean here. Spouse.
Thanks. From being dried out and also from predators, because lots of things like to eat baby oysters.
Yeah, I guess.
In the wild, they've got a survival rate of about 1%, but harvesting and setting, remote setting, they've got a 30% survival rate.
With Ted around, they have less.
Especially when he wants
I
to
don't think
harvest
he'll
them
be
and
able
eat
to
them.
catch anything.
That we've had in the media about the bacteria and people getting sick from oysters. So Fanny Bay shut down actually before the Ministry of the Environment put a ban on the harvesting, because we don't want to be responsible for people being sick.
Right.
We don't want to damage the industry by putting out shellfish that could be contaminated. So the option is to shut down and protect everything and allow the season to settle out. What happens is the temperature gets too warm and the bacteria reproduces too fast.
It's probably the best time for tourists right now.
It's a great time for tourists, yeah. Our algae.
Can you move it a little bit
That's
more?
cultured. Yeah, come on in. Sure. This is cultured algae. And what we do is we have a certain cell count, and each one of them is a single cell, but there's like billions in a milliliter of water. And these are 750-liter tanks. This is what our oysters eat. There's different species of it, which is why you have different colors. But we try to give them the best nutrition possible. So only the highest quality food goes out. If something happens to it, we don't use it. We take this food, develop it to a certain stage, then we take some off so we can keep reproducing the food until it's not good anymore. And depending on how many, you'll see different tags to show you how old this tank is or how long it's been used. That'll tell you how good the quality is. When it starts getting too long, we'll turn it and just start again. We'll take new culture. And the algae culture actually comes from a hatchery as well. And that's how we get it started. And we produce it here, and it'll double overnight. Sort of, I don't know if anyone's had sourdough. Same idea. You just get a starter, and you add to it, and it doubles. Well, that's the same thing with this, except it's a living organism. It's actually plants. And that's what the oysters eat. I'll bring this through here. These filtered seawater, these are a water tank. Different species. Yeah, there's different species. There's phytoplankton and tetrasalmus. And so we take them from the columns, get them started there. We'll move them over into these big tanks, put in maybe half, and then add filtered seawater and vitamins and nutrients. And then it'll come up overnight and multiply. The lights help it to multiply faster. And we take it from these tanks. We pump it through the pump. We have a water system that takes it out into the setting tanks where the oyster shells are. And that's what we feed them. So they're getting this in nature once they go to the beaches. But to give them the best start and to have the highest success rate, this is the best way to do it. The industry is growing and developing all the time. And we're duplicating what happens in nature, but with more success, so that we have a real viable industry rather than just by chance. And even then, things can happen in nature on the beaches and stuff that affects their survival rate. But we think we're doing pretty good.
How old is the industry?
Now that I'm not really sure of. I know this plant has been in production for at least 15 years. But not at this size. One thing, we'll do 960 Vexar bags of shells in one set. We'll do 3 sets in a week. So we sometimes do, in a season, 40,000 bags. And we sell them to different growers. A lot of them are kept for Fanny Bay oysters. But this is how we can perpetuate an industry that would otherwise not be supported in nature. It just wouldn't happen.
So you say you provide other growers, so if I had a lease, there's a lot of leases around, I could probably get my oysters from you.
You can get your seed from us. You can have us set shells if you want. Anything, you know. It's a really cooperative industry because it's if you don't support each other and help out, then the industry won't stay together. You know, you can't. We all share the same ocean. We all share the same, you know, environment. So it is a cooperative bunch, and they are supportive of each other. Is there any other questions?
Does the Shellfish Growers Association have an office locally, or it's just in Victoria?
I don't know where the office is.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
I know we're members.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'm going to take you through. If you have no more questions about the setting operation.
Up till the point in time that you destroy it, you're not really dependent on that seawater that much, are you? It's all...
Oh, absolutely, because the seawater that's in these tanks right now is pumped through that pump right there. We've got a water inlet out in the bay, and that's where we take our seawater from, and we pump it in up through these lines, and I tie filter bags onto these hoses here, onto these pipes, and I filter the water that goes into these tanks before we eat it. So when the water's contaminated out there, it's contaminated here.
The filtering won't take that out.
It takes out the wild algae, bacteria, and predators, and it literally leaves it almost completely clear. And then we put the algae that we want from the greenhouse into the tank so that the babies get the very best food, and they don't have any natural predators that way because we've screened them through the filter bags.
That's what I mean. when that water is contaminated like it is at the moment, supposedly, that's not affecting what you're
With the
doing.
bacteria?
Yeah.
Oh yes.
They're still
The bacteria
contaminated.
can still go in, and we're not going to harvest these for a number of years, and oysters clean themselves up. Bacteria that's actually in the oysters right now is a bacteria that's always in them, just like we have strep all the time, and we have staph all the time. It's just not out of control when we're healthy. When we're sick, the infection is out of control, or that bacteria is out of control. And that's the same thing that's happened with the oysters at this point. With all the warm weather that we've had and the changes in the environment, that bacteria that's always in them has gotten out of control. And because people were eating them not well cooked, their bodies couldn't tolerate it. So people got sick.
This contamination happens with regularity every year.
Every year when the tides get too warm, when the water gets too warm and the beaches, because they're exposed to so much sunlight and there's such vast areas of it, and the tides come up and it's very shallow, then you've got a perfect breeding ground. Sometimes when the kids go out to play in the water, it's like a warm tub, you know, when the water comes up, because it's just that residual heat from the water, or from the beach, going into the water, just, it's really nice for the bacteria too. But it's only for a short season. We almost always get red tide somewhere, what they call red tide, because then we can't use it, you know, and we don't harvest from those beaches. And it's very carefully monitored because we don't want people sick.
So your operation is just kind of put on hold at that point.
The harvesting part of it is.
Oh, okay.
You can harvest from other beaches that aren't affected by that, but
You can plant too.
and you can
Seeds,
still
well,
see,
to
yeah,
pick up.
yeah. And if you get into an area where the water is contaminated, you can move. You pick your oysters up and move them. Like they'll harvest them. The beach crews go out there with pitchforks and shovels, and they just scoop them up into containers or buckets and whatever. They take them to a safe beach. They can be left there, I think, maybe 6 weeks at the maximum for some things to clean up, and they'll be fine. So, but it's all tested and monitored because people don't understand shellfish the way they understand meat or chicken. You know, when you get a tourist that comes and takes a bag of oysters, leaves it in the car, goes shopping, tours around, goes home, and thinks they can eat them raw. Well, you can't. You wouldn't do that with hamburger. So, and you shouldn't do it with shellfish or fish. You wouldn't do it with salmon. But for some reason, because they think the thing is still alive, that it's okay.
The industry, it doesn't suffer a loss, does it? When water is contaminated. Still, just postpone the harvesting.
Yeah, we don't lose. You're asking if we lose the product. No, no, we don't go out and kill
Like
anything.
you have hail in the Okanagan, they've lost their product.
Right,
Yeah.
right. No, we don't lose the product.
That's true. But you have to lay off some employees. And
Well, there's temporary
a lot-
layoffs
yeah.
and things like that have to happen because you can't force something to happen in nature that it has a mind of its own. It's beyond your control. But like you say, a hailed out crop is a hailed out crop. A red tide is simply a matter of time. Or you move your product and let it clean up.
Excuse me, how long did you say you leave them here before you move them?
They're only 6 days.
There's only
6 days from the set date to the beach is 6 days.
in here. I
Yeah,
see.
yeah. So we can go through a lot. We turn them over pretty quick. I'm going to take you back over to the reception area where the sign is, and then you'll get a tour of the plant area. Someone will pick you up there and take you around for a tour there.
But yeah,
But oyster, remote setting, oyster seeding, all of this is happening on almost every continent in the world, every temperate continent in the world. They do it in Africa, they do it all over the place. South America. Yeah.
Yours is just the best.
Pardon?
Yours is just the best.
Probably.
Yeah.
We have to say that, right? It's just very good. Rob's going to take you through the processing plant. If you want to stop and read a little bit of this first. Are you ready to go?
Yeah.
Maybe it's through the setting operations. It's Marge.
Marge, hi Marge.
Boat comes in along here, we hoist everything off. If it's for the plant, it goes into totes or onto skids.
If it's for our shucking operation, it goes into these bins that you see behind you here. We can drop a cargo net of oysters in there, pull the drawstring, just winch up on the net, and everything spills out into the bin, so it's a very quick operation to load them up. From here, if it's for a depuration, it goes in through this end, is washed and prepped to put in the tanks. And the shucking operation is over here. This is where we shuck the meat out totally. It's all out. The oysters just spill out. Onto the shucking bench of water. Dump the meat in. Then we pump air through the bubbler. That rolls the meat around to make sure there's no pieces of shell or anything on the meat. From there it spills out onto a grading table, and the grader is graded by size. Then the oyster is cut and it's put aside in a special pail. We can use them for smoking or whatever. So and then we pack in 8-ounce, 16-ounce, 32-ounce containers. In the 32-ounce containers, we grade them by size, small, medium, large. There, they're boxed, put in the cooler, and gotten ready for the shipment. We ship 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and everything is around that. For the fresh operation, or the freezing operation, everything goes into the incoming cooler at this end. So as soon as it comes off the boat, load it in the boat, drop down and put it in the cooler here. If the shuckers aren't going into that tank, they're brought in here. So everything's kept refrigerated once it leaves the beach.
That last building is where they struck them?
Yeah. In here, we can hold up to 32 skids of product coming off the beach. But we don't have it running today. We didn't want to make it too uncomfortable for everybody. Systems are all on alarm systems, so there's a cooling problem in the middle of the night, we know about it right away, et cetera, et cetera. So from here, goes through the incoming corridor. The entrance to the processing area. You'll notice a dip in the floor here. We refill that with sanitizing water. So all the wheels of the pallet jacks and wheelers as they come into the processing area are sanitized. In here we have the freezing operation. If we're freezing oysters, we do it 2 ways. We freeze them whole or with the top shell removed. Ones that are frozen with the top shell removed come in on totes like this. They use the shucking edge to remove the top shell and place it in the plastic tray. From there, the plastic tray goes into the slide operation at the start of the freezing tunnel. And it's washed, it's rinsed off with sterilized seawater, and it's blown dry. And then it enters onto the moving conveyor through the freeze tunnel. This freeze tunnel runs at minus 90 degrees Fahrenheit. With a wind chill factor, it uses liquid CO2 to do the freezing. Hence the large silo outside. 50 metric ton liquid CO2 silo. At the end of the operation, the oyster is frozen right through in 3 to 4 minutes. It comes out, it goes under a glazed bar, put a fine water spray on it, the water freezes because the product is so cold. From there it's packed into the pieces, from there into the freezer. On the fresh side, all our oysters are packed in boxes for shipment. Some customers take them in the sacks that they come in. We call that tag and bag. We just put an ID tag on it. We have to track everything right back to the original piece. So everything has the hardest date on it, the packing date on it. That's the lease that it came off of, et cetera, et cetera. So if there's a recall or any problems, we can track everything right back to the original piece.
That also a thing for fisheries?
Yes, that's part of their quality management program. This machine at the end is where we wash our clams. clams we got in, once we dug out the sand, so they're covered in sand and everything else. They go up and go under a water spray, tumbled and washed off, and then they go onto a viewing table where we pick out any ones that are cracked or whatever. And then they go up the conveyor, and then they go into a sizer, and size them, small, medium, and large. There, they're just boxed, put in the cooler, ready for shipping. They said we ship on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Oysters are packed on Monday for Wednesday shipment. Clams are done Tuesday. Trucks loaded generally around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. At 3 o'clock in the morning, it leaves with the first ferry, and in Vancouver by 8 o'clock. It's going by air, it's loaded on the container, on top of that thing. So it's a very good turnaround.
How many people are employed?
Last winter when we were in full operation, we were averaging between 100 and 110 people. That includes our beach crew too. We have a very large beach crew. The plant's busy in the winter. The beaches are busy in the summer. We do all our beach maintenance in the summer months. That's the lowest tide of the day is, and the daylight hours. In the winter time, you can see all the crew out there with their headlamps on. Out there harvesting, but it's blowing and snowing. And that's like, we see clams for it. Yes. We farm clams here. We buy seed and for clams, there used to be a size limit on, well, there is in the wild fishery. There's a wild little tank. They have to meet the 38 millimeter size limit. But on farm clams now, we can farm them in and harvest them in the size we want.
So what's the ship to Vancouver?
In Vancouver, we sell to several companies in Vancouver, Pacific Rim Shellfish, Hawaiian Skate, Deluxe, Albion.
Anywhere, is there supermarkets?
No, we sell mainly to distributors, and they distribute it from there. We don't sell directly to individual stores and stuff like that. We sell mainly to distributors.
This process that you were talking about, are they still in the hatch shell?
Yes.
They're shipped out in the hatch shell?
Yes. And so, well, for a couple of reasons. The customer, restaurant, buys a box of those in half shell, gets an order, he takes half a dozen oysters out, they're ready to thaws them.
Okay, so he has the ability of serving you still in the hatch shell?
Yeah.
Okay.
Some restaurants will buy shuck meat from us. They also buy shell from us because they don't have anyone who's good at shucking oysters or whatever. So they will buy the shell, they'll boil it, they'll lay the oyster in it, and serve it that way. But a lot of people like half shell. So what we do is we eliminate the process of having the shell. So it makes it very good.
You don't get shell back.
No. We do get quite a bit of shell from our shucking operation, but I would say probably 80% of that we recycle into our setting operation, and we do sell it to the log dump over your ice shelf, milk over there. Disney bought some here, there's a picture of the river, bought a couple truckloads of shell.
So you don't have a shortage of shell?
We don't have a shortage, but we don't have an overabundance of it either. We recycle most of our stuff.
Your clams, we've seen in good detail how your oysters are set. But what happens? How do you do? What do you do with the clams? How do you get?
Well,
that?
we don't set seed on clams ourselves. We buy it already seeded, and I'm not too familiar with their operation.
I see. But they come in similar in bags already.
Yeah, we buy them at they're about 3 mil, and they come. They fly them in, with a box, and it just looks like a bunch of little pellets of air.
and then you just scatter them.
Yes.
Do they dig their way in the sand?
Yes.
Do you use the machine to harvest them, or it's all hand?
All hand. All hand. This is a very labor-intensive business. Nobody's invented a good shucker yet that can do it automatically and et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of people are involved in what we do. All the beach work is done manually. So we're, we do employ good basic people around here.
Have oysters ever been seeded under the water from spring?
Yes. Goes to your long line. The oysters that people will buy seed from us, but we do sell the seed. Not all that seed is for us. We naturally need a certain percentage for ourselves, but there are long line operations that buy seed from us, and then we buy finished product back from them for a shipping operation.
They drill a hole in
No, what they use is a rope. There's different ways of setting it for what we call long line oyster or shucking oyster. You can set them on aluminum pipes, see, where they'll fill those bins up with aluminum pipes, and then the seed will actually set on the pipes. Then we just change the pipes and pull on. Or they use a rope called oyster glue. It's a tooth line. You just open it up, slide the shell in, go down, open it up, and they just keep on lowering the dip, on adding shell every couple of feet. And then the cluster just grows off that whole shell. When they harvest, they bring it up and cut the rope. They'll break the cluster apart. The better job they do of breaking the clusters apart makes it easier for our shuckers to get into all the oysters better than cover. Because we pay on cover, we don't pay on gross weight coming in. And so when every lot that goes through, we do a tally on separated by orders. Last time we were right here, we were 6 hours a day. Morning, 3:30 after, and then lunch work, we get paid by the gallon. So a good shutter, we make $15 an hour. We encourage everybody to give us the law. Summer months, generally after May, water.
There for a minute. That method there that you see, that's bagging the old shell, putting it into the tanks. The enhanced photo you see there is an oyster larvae, and that's a shot taken under a microscope. It's about 1,000 times as big as it really is, and that's the beach method of growing oysters, and it requires a tremendous amount of labor. You can see the laborers breaking the crop there, because when we set on the old shell, we get anywhere from 5 to 25 oysters on each old shell, and they grow like a cauliflower with ears all over the place. So you'll see a picture about mid-row on the bottom. That crew is breaking the clumps apart. And then the next picture following that is someone picking the single oysters out of the crop, and then the crop will be broken again and again and again for 5 years in a row, and you finally end up with the 11th picture there with a beach full of singles. And anything that can't be broken into a single oyster goes into our meat department and is just shucked and the meat is shipped. So that's the older method of doing it. This is the newer method with rafts. And what we're doing here is planting single seed in trays, and we're accelerating the growth because the oysters are feeding 24 hours a day, as opposed to about 18 hours a day when they're on the intertidal area. But when they feed 24 hours a day, they never learn to close their mouths. So we have to take them out of the trays at the end of the growing process, put them on the beach, and we call this process beach hardening. So when they're beached, they learn to develop a very strong abductor muscle, and they close tightly, which in turn allows us to ship them to the live market, and they have more shelf life than they would have if they just came out of the tray. If you ship them right out of the tray, they have about 3 days shelf life. If you train them to close their shell properly and be tight and resist the natural predation on the beach, then you can ship them to the live market and they'll last for 2 weeks. So tremendous difference.
This operation here is right across the bay, isn't it? This raft business?
We have some rafts out in front of us here. There's some rafts in Deep Bay that don't belong to us. And we have some rafts that do belong to us in front of Lone Pine Farm on Denman Island.
That's the one.
So is there any questions from your tour that I can answer? My name's Glenn.
So 5 years to 5 years on the beach, you're saying?
For our largest size group.
So the entire life cycle or whatever from birth to dinner plate is what, 4 to 6 years then?
Well, our first size range is 9 months.
Okay, so
When we started here 12 years ago, the average crop rotation was 5 years. It's now, the average crop rotation is now 2.5 years. And we plan on cutting that in half. See, one of the things about our industry is we haven't gotten any new ground, even though we're very, like you hear every politician say jobs, jobs, jobs nowadays. Well, it's basically bunk, because we can employ 5,000 people, but we can't get the ground to do it on. And and the things that get in our way are the general public looks at the ocean as the commons, okay? And it doesn't matter if there's a fishery out there trashing the hell out of everything. If you ask to farm there, you see, that's the other thing. Like they look at the fisheries as a common venture, when in fact it's not in Canada, and it hasn't been for 70 years. I used to be a fisherman, and all the fishing rights were sold to private ownership years ago. You can buy one, but it's not a common enterprise anymore. So we probably will never get any more land. So what we have to do, and what we've been concentrating on for 12 years, is getting more volume out of what we do have. So that's where our entire focus has been.
So how are you going to reduce it to 2.5 years?
We've already reduced it.
You said you hope to cut it in half again.
Right.
And if you don't get more ground, how are you going to do it?
Well, we just keep on. Every year we discover new husbandry tricks that accelerate the growth. So that's where the time has come from. Plus, on the marketing end of things, we used to sell nothing but oysters this big, and now we're selling 5 size ranges. And in fact, the ones we sell this big command a better price now than the ones we sell this big. So it doesn't make much sense to have the crop there for 5 years.
Yeah.
So, but that's changing too. Because the industry was developed the way that it did, the bigger oysters were cheaper in the old days. And now that the focus is on rolling the crop over, they're becoming more and more and more rare. But it took a while to eliminate that inventory of crop. So that's where the glut in size was up until about 4 years ago, and then the larger oysters started diminishing. So now, of course, it's supply and demand, so the price is going up. But what we want to do is grow an oyster this big in in 1 year or less. And we'll do it.
We have little oysters on the beach in front of our place in plastic cages. And they're about yay size.
Yes? Where do you live?
Ship point.
Yeah.
And I see them harvesting a couple of days ago. Where did they take them from there?
Oh, they weren't harvesting them. Basically, that's a seed storage area. And what they're doing is they're just holding them until we can deal with them in this process. So we have a revolving crop on this, on these rafts. And one thing we do is, you know, it's very difficult to schedule the hatchery, and because you're still waiting for Mother Nature in a lot of it. And so what we're doing there is we're just holding the oysters at a certain size until we can make room for them on the rafts.
Where are you holding?
In those pouches, in front of your house, I guess. Yeah. Yeah. So that's what we're doing there. And there's also that's part of the conditioning of the oyster. So that's a bit of a husbandry trick that we've developed to try and get them to learn very early in life to develop a strong muscle. So it makes them more hardy, and we don't have the percentage of loss in the seed if we can condition them right away. So
How do you get singles then?
how do we get singles?
Little single ones instead of the clusters.
Well, it's basically what you use for to set on. And instead of setting on whole empty shells, we're setting those babies on ground shell. So it's just like fine sand and smaller than a pepper flake. And then we upwell it, forcing water through the bottom of a tank. So we're tumbling the sand, and then we mix the oyster larvae, and the oyster larvae seeks a place to attach. And instead of, it's really in its simplest form, instead of attaching to a shell this big, it attaches to one that's about 1/10 the size of a pepper flake.
That's great.
Yeah.
You don't have that custom problem on the freaking side.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for coming. Our production is growing every year.
Yeah.
Right now, we have a waiting list about this thick.
Oh, you do it.
Yeah. Damn right I would.
So there's always a little lever there.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Would you give some like? Yeah, that's that.
Just fax a request for a price list.
Okay. You don't mind that?
No.
I appreciate it. I travel a lot too. In fact, I know it. So you have this is strictly oyster. Oysters.
Oysters and clams.
Oysters are.
Yeah.
Man, they're good.
Yeah.
They are. How do you smoke them?
Well, we don't do the smoking, St. Jean's and all. Hi, Barbara.
This is a blend.
Yeah.
Can you sell them the stuff right now? He says, gotta wait and stuff. I said to him, well, you know, $1 buck, you know.